Hello dear listener, if you watching this video, it means God has chosen you to be the savior of your loved ones. The testimony I will be sharing with you today has been on our table for a while now. This testimony took us weeks to digest before bringing it to you today. I beg you, if there is good thing you can do for me today, that is to stay with me to the end of this testimony, because what happened at the end of this testimony is something nobody would want to miss. Before I share this testimony with you, please kindly give this video a thumbs up, share with those you love, and please, if you are joining us for the very first time, we appreciate you, and we ask you to kindly hit that subscribe button so that you won't miss future testimonies that will be shared on this channel. Now, let us know where you are watching from in the comments section. That way we can connect as one family. God bless you. Now relax and listen carefully as I share her testimony with you. My name is Sandra Paul, and for 15 years I have been a very devoted church lady. But today, I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. Not my husband, not my pastor, not even the therapist I secretly saw for 6 weeks in 2019 before I stopped going because I was terrified she would figure me out. I want to tell you about the night I died, or almost died, or whatever it was that happened in my kitchen on that fateful evening in February when my children were upstairs doing homework and my husband was watching something on TV in the living room, and I was alone. The way I always needed to be alone for what I was about to do. But let me start before that. Let me start with the woman people thought they knew. Sandra Paul was dependable. Sandra Paul brought the green bean casserole to every church potluck without being asked. Sandra Paul led the women's Bible study on Thursday mornings, and she was good at it. She knew her scripture. She knew how to ask the right questions to get the quiet women talking. She knew how to cry at the right moment when someone shared something vulnerable because she genuinely felt it. She genuinely did, and that was the confusing part. I was not a fake person. I loved God. I loved my church. I loved those women sitting around that table with their coffee cups and their highlighted devotional books. But I was carrying something I had been carrying since I was 23 years old. Since the year my mother died and a doctor prescribed me something for the pain and anxiety, and I discovered that the world was a quieter, softer, more manageable place when that thing was in my system. That was where it started, gently, clinically, reasonably, and then slowly over years, it became something else entirely, something I couldn't name out loud, something I buried under casseroles and Bible verses and Thursday morning discussions about Proverbs 31. I'm talking about pills, prescription pills that I had long since run out of legitimate reasons to be taking, that I got from places I am too ashamed to describe in detail, that I hid in a small orange prescription bottle inside a tampon box under my bathroom sink, because I knew my husband would never open that. 17 years of marriage, and he never opened that box. I counted on that. I built my whole secret life on that small, reliable fact. I want you to understand something. I knew the scripture. I knew Matthew 19:24, where Jesus says it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I used to think that verse was about money, about materialism, about people who loved their cars and their vacations more than they loved God. I used to read that verse with a quiet, comfortable distance from it, and then somewhere around year 10 of my addiction, I started reading it differently. I started reading it and seeing myself. I was the camel. I was trying to squeeze through week after week with this enormous thing on my back. This thing I could not put down, and every Sunday I would walk into that sanctuary carrying it, and I would lift my hands during worship, and I would mean it. I genuinely meant it, and I would also feel the weight of what I was hiding pressing down on my chest like a stone. That is a specific kind of torture. To love God and to be hiding from Him at the same time, to be leading other women into vulnerability, while living in the most locked up, sealed version of yourself. I used to sit in that pew and think about Revelation 30:16, where God says, "Because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth." and I would feel it land on me. I would feel it like a finger pointing directly at my chest. Because that was exactly what I was. Lukewarm. Warm enough to look like fire from a distance, cold enough underneath that I could not sustain it. I told myself the same things for years. I will stop next month. I will stop after the holidays. I will stop when the kids are older and life feels less heavy. I told myself that God understood. I told myself that my secret was not hurting anyone, which was a lie I was very skilled at believing. I told myself that I was still doing good, still showing up, still serving, and that had to count for something. The night everything broke open, I had had a harder week than usual. My daughter had a school thing I missed because I was not feeling well, which was a phrase I used to cover the days when the pills were running low, and my body started reminding me with a ferocity that frightened me. My husband had looked at me in a way that suggested he was starting to notice something without knowing what he was noticing. There was a tension in the house that I could not explain and could not fix. That Tuesday evening I was standing at the kitchen counter. The kids were upstairs. My husband was in the other room. I had just taken what I needed to take to level myself out, and I was waiting for the edges of the world to soften the way they always did. I was standing there with my hands flat on the cold granite counter, and I remember looking at the fruit bowl and thinking it was strange that bananas still existed. I don't know why I thought that. My mind was doing something odd, and then it happened. There is no gentle way to say this. My heart stopped. Or something happened to my heart that felt like stopping. It was not like the chest pain you read about on medical websites. It was not a squeeze or a pressure. It was more like a door slamming shut inside me. And then I felt something I cannot fully explain even now. I felt something shoot out of my body. Not slip, not float, shoot, like I was a cannon and my soul was the cannonball, and someone had lit the fuse without asking me. 1 second, I was standing at the kitchen counter thinking about bananas, and the next second I was above myself looking down at a woman in a gray cardigan slumped against the cabinets, sliding slowly toward the floor. I want to tell you that I screamed. I didn't. You cannot scream without a body. I could see the fruit bowl from above. I could see the little chip on the rim that I had been meaning to throw away for 2 years. I could see the top of my own head, and I remember thinking that I needed a trim and feeling the absurdity of that thought in a moment like that. And then I stopped thinking about my hair because the kitchen was starting to change. It is very difficult to describe what happened next in a language built for describing kitchens and fruit bowls. The room did not disappear. It was more like something else became visible alongside it, like a frequency I had never been able to hear before suddenly turned on. There was someone there. I say someone because angel feels like a word from a Sunday school flannel board, and what I encountered was nothing like that. There was a presence, and the presence was full of something I can only call joy, but that word is too small. It was more like joy was the closest human emotion to whatever this being was made of. And it was not standing still. It was moving in a way that suggested it found everything around it interesting and delightful and worthy of attention. It did not speak to me with sound. I want to be very clear about that because I know how that sounds, and I have spent 3 years trying to find the right words. It communicated the way you sometimes know what someone is about to say before they say it. Except in this case, I received complete, full thoughts, all at once, the way you might receive a song, not word by word, but the whole thing at once. And the first thing it communicated to me was not alarm, it was not urgency. It was more like warmth, more like recognition, like running into someone who knows you well in an unexpected place. And I understood, without being told in any sequential way, that this being was not surprised to see me, that I was known, that my whole complicated, messy, hidden, terrified self was completely known, and I was not being looked at with disappointment. I want to stop here and tell you that I started crying when I realized that. Except I had no body to cry with. So whatever crying is at its root, that happened. The being showed me, not in pictures but in something like understanding, that there were people pulling on me, not maliciously, out of love. my husband, my daughter, my son. I could feel them from wherever I was, the way you feel a string tied to your wrist. And I understood that I was hovering, that there was something ahead of me and something behind me, and the strings were taut, and the being's presence was not telling me to go or to stay, but showing me that I had to choose, and that the choosing was real and the stakes were real. I felt my children and I broke apart. That is the only way to say it. Whatever I was at that moment, I broke, because the love I felt for them from that perspective was not the love I felt on normal days when I was distracted by schedules and lunches and resentments and fatigue. It was the original love, the love that existed before any of that, and it was unbearable in a way that was also completely beautiful. And that was when I saw myself, not from above. I saw myself in a way I do not have geometry for. I saw what I was, not my body, what I was underneath my body. I had always assumed, in the vague and untested way you assume things you've heard in church since childhood, that the soul looks like a flame, that it glows and flickers and reaches upward. That is the image I had carried without knowing I carried it. I expected to see a flame. What I saw looked like a rock, not a terrible rock, not a terrible rock. It glowed. It had light inside it, real light, the kind that does not need a source. But the light was inside the rock, and the rock was thick, and the rock was the color of old concrete. And it was layered the way sediment layers, the way years of something pressing down on something else creates distinct visible strata. And I knew what those layers were. I knew them the way you know your own handwriting. Each layer was a year. Each layer was a Tuesday evening at the kitchen counter. Each layer was a Sunday morning of carrying the camel through the eye of the needle and pretending it fit. The light was real. The light was mine. God had put it there, and it had not gone out. But it was encased. It was surrounded, and I understood with a grief that went beyond any grief I have felt in my body that the light could not fully reach out through that stone, that what people received from me, the casseroles and the Bible study questions and the lifted hands in worship, was real, but it was filtered. It was what made it through the casing, and there was so much more that had not made it through. I do not think I had ever truly grieved my addiction before that moment. I had been ashamed of it. I had hated it. I had fought it weakly and surrendered to it repeatedly. But grief was different. Grief meant acknowledging what it had cost me, and what it had cost the people around me, and what it had cost my own soul, without needing to defend myself or explain myself or contextualize it. It was just the truth, sitting there glowing through concrete. Then the portal opened. I am going to be careful here because I do not want to be dramatic for the sake of being dramatic, and I do not want to reach for language that makes this sound like a movie. But I also am not willing to minimize what I saw, because I spent 3 years trying to minimize it, and I am done with that. There was an opening, not a door, not a tunnel with a light, which is what I had heard described by other people who had experiences like this. This was a darkness, but darkness is not the right word, because darkness is just the absence of light, and this was not an absence. This was a presence. This was something that had substance and texture and temperature, and the temperature was cold, and the cold was not like winter cold. Winter cold is just physics. This cold was intentional. This cold was aware. And coming from that place was the purest terror I have ever experienced. Not terror like a fright, not the jump of your heart when someone startles you. This was terror as a total condition, terror as an atmosphere, terror as the only thing that existed in that direction, stretching back without end, without relief, without the possibility of relief. I cannot tell you I understood everything in that moment theologically. I cannot tell you I had a complete systematic understanding of what I was looking at. I can tell you that every Sunday school lesson and every Bible verse and every church service I had ever half listened to while composing my grocery list in my head suddenly became physically real to me in a way that made me furious with myself for having treated them casually. They had been trying to tell me about something real, something with texture and temperature and weight. And I had nodded and highlighted and brought the casserole. I did not want to go there. I want to be very clear. There was nothing in me, not even the part of me that had been tired for years, that wanted to go toward that cold darkness. And I understood with absolute certainty that I was close, that the direction I had been drifting, slowly, Tuesday by Tuesday, pill by pill, Sunday by Sunday with my camel on my back, had been toward that and not away from it. Not because God was sending me there, because I had been choosing it in the slow, incremental, reasonably justified way that people choose things they never intend to choose. I called out, again, not with sound, with whatever I was at that moment. I reached in the direction of the only name I knew to reach toward, Jesus. I want to tell you it was a beautiful, composed prayer with sentence structure. It was not. It was the way you scream a name when you are drowning. It was the whole history of my complicated relationship with that name, compressed into a single desperate reaching. It had all of it in it. The Sundays I meant it and the Sundays I performed it, and the years I hid from him while showing up to his house every week. It had the shame in it and the love in it, and the absolute raw animal terror in it. And I heard something, not with ears, the same way the angel communicated. The whole thing at once, like a song, 3 words. Do not be afraid. That was it, that was all. And I want to tell you those 3 words were not enough, and they were also completely enough in a way that made no logical sense, because the cold was still there, because I could still feel the weight of the stone around my light, because nothing had been fixed yet and I knew it. But something had heard me, something had answered, something that I had been treating like a theological concept for 15 years turned out to be a being who knew my name and could see my glow-in-the-dark rock soul through the layers of concrete and was not finished with me. I slammed back into my body the way you would expect a cannonball to return if physics worked backwards. All at once and with impact. The granite counter was cold under my hands, my back was against the cabinet and my legs were out in front of me on the kitchen floor, and the fruit bowl was above me, and the chip on the rim was there, and somewhere in the house a television was on and my kids were upstairs and I was breathing. I was breathing. I stayed on that floor for a while. I don't know how long. Long enough that my husband eventually came in looking for a snack and found me there and crouched down and said, "Sandra, what happened? Are you okay?" And I looked at him and I did not know how to begin. I did not know how to take 15 years and a kitchen floor and an angel and a glowing rock and a portal and 3 words and turn them into something a person could say to their husband on a Tuesday evening. I said I need help. I said I need to tell you something, and I started talking. The hospital came later that night. There was a cardiac event, they said. There was a brief period of dangerous arrhythmia. There was monitoring and tests and a cardiologist who spoke quickly and a nurse named Patricia who was kind and held my hand while my husband stepped out to call his mother to come stay with the kids. I lay in that hospital bed with a monitor beeping beside me and the IV in my arm, and the specific quality of quiet that hospital rooms have at 2 in the morning. And I thought about the rock, my sealed up, layered, light-containing rock of a soul. And I thought about what it would take to start breaking the stone away, not all at once. I was not naive enough to think there was a version of this that happened all at once, but one layer at a time, starting with the truth, starting with what I had already said to my husband, starting with the appointment I was going to make and keep this time. I was not transformed lying in that hospital bed. I want to be clear about that because I think there is a version of this story where the person wakes up completely changed and never struggles again, and I do not want to tell you that version because it is not my version. I woke up with the same addiction in my body, and the same shame in my chest, and the same complicated history with a God I loved and hid from simultaneously. But I also woke up knowing something I had not fully known before, that the light was real, that it was mine, that it had not gone out despite everything I had done to insulate it from the world, and that somewhere on the other side of the stone was a flame, Not the polite warm glow of a woman who brings casseroles and sits in the third pew from the front. A real flame. The kind that gives actual heat. The kind that cannot be hidden under layers of years and secrets and Tuesday evenings. I've been in recovery for 3 years and 2 months. I have told my story to my pastor, to my women's group, to a counselor I see every other week, who I have now seen for long enough that she actually knows me. I still sit in that third pew on Sunday mornings, same spot, cracked Bible, yellow highlighter. But I am different in the pew. I am not smaller. I am not performing. I am not carrying the camel. I am still working on the stone, layer by layer. It is slower than I would like. It is also more real than anything I have ever done. And sometimes in worship, when the music is right and my guard is down, I can feel something flicker in my chest, something warm and reaching. And I believe, I genuinely believe, that one day it will not be a rock anymore. One day it will be what it was always supposed to be. And the voice that said, "Do not be afraid," in my dark kitchen while I was a cannonball soul hovering over my fruit bowl, will be the same voice I hear when there is nothing between me and it anymore. I am not lukewarm anymore. I am not fully aflame yet either. But I am moving in that direction. Please don't let my experience be your portion. Do what Jesus wants, because you may think you have the whole time here on earth, but believe me, even the person who died today thought same. We have limited time here. Accept Jesus and give him that secret life to handle. The end of every sinner won't be a joke. Please learn from my experience, and I will be the most happiest person. Thank you for listening, and please, if this testimony has blessed you, please kindly share it with someone else, because this message is not meant for one person, it's for all. Stay blessed and stay safe.